I've never even been kissed. Those 6 words, whispered by one of the most powerful women in the country, would shatter everything Daniel Brooks thought he knew about survival, protection, and love. A single father, a billionaire CEO, 2 worlds that should never collide. But tonight, in a glittering ballroom filled with lies and champagne, fate had other plans. This is their story, raw, complicated, and achingly real. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if it moves you, hit that like button. Now let me take you back to where it all began. The grand ballroom of the Meridian Hotel gleamed like a jewelry box. Crystal chandeliers casting prismatic light across marble floors, walls draped in ivory silk, and a crowd dressed in designer labels that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Waiters glided between clusters of guests, their trays loaded with champagne flutes and delicate hors d'oeuvres that looked more like art than food. Daniel Brooks stood near a towering ficus tree in the corner, his fingers wrapped around a glass of water he hadn't taken a single sip from. The suit he wore, borrowed from his brother-in-law Marcus for this exact occasion, fit well enough, but it felt like a costume. The fabric was too stiff, the collar too tight, and every time he moved, he was hyper-aware that he didn't belong here. He checked his watch. 8:47 p.m. Lily would be asleep by now. Mrs. Chen, his neighbor who babysat on the rare occasions he couldn't avoid events like this, had probably already read her The Velveteen Rabbit twice and sung the lullaby Lily insisted on every night. The image of his 6-year-old daughter curled up under her unicorn blanket made his chest tighten with longing. 2 hours, he reminded himself. You promised Marcus 2 hours, and then you can leave. Marcus worked in corporate development for Grant Industries, one of the largest tech conglomerates in the nation. And when he'd invited Daniel to this charity gala 3 weeks ago, Daniel had tried every excuse in the book. But Marcus had been insistent, almost desperate. You need to get out, man, Marcus had said over beers at their usual dive bar. When's the last time you did something that wasn't work or Lily? You're 32, not 60. I'm fine, Daniel had replied, the same answer he always gave. You're surviving. There's a difference. Daniel had almost argued, but the truth was too heavy to deny. Since Sarah's death 4 years ago, survival was all he'd managed. Work his shifts at the construction site, pick up Lily from school, make dinner, help with homework. Bedtime routine, repeat. The rhythm was exhausting, but safe, predictable. It kept the chaos at bay. Going to a gala full of wealthy strangers who talked about stock portfolios and vacation homes in the Hamptons, that wasn't safe. That was torture. But Marcus had pulled the guilt card, something about the company expecting him to bring a guest, and his wife being out of town, and Daniel had caved. Now, standing in this sea of people who belonged to a world he'd only ever seen in movies, Daniel felt every bit the fraud. A woman in a red dress laughed too loudly nearby, her hand on the arm of a silver-haired man who looked like he'd stepped out of a cologne ad. A waiter offered Daniel a tray of something involving caviar and gold leaf. He declined with a polite shake of his head. First time? A voice asked. Daniel turned to find an older man with kind eyes and a slight paunch straining against his tuxedo. He held a whiskey glass and wore an expression that suggested he too was counting the minutes. That obvious? Daniel asked. The man chuckled. Only to someone else who doesn't belong. Gerald Finch. I run a chain of hardware stores. Not exactly the type they usually invite to these things, but my wife plays tennis with the event coordinator, so... He shrugged. You? Daniel Brooks. I'm here with my brother-in-law. He works for Grant Industries. Ah. Gerald nodded knowingly. The mandatory +1. I've been there. Word of advice. The shrimp puffs by the bar are actually decent, and there's a balcony on the east side if you need air. These things can get suffocating. Thanks, Daniel said, genuinely grateful. Gerald clapped him on the shoulder and wandered off, leaving Daniel alone again with his water and his thoughts. He scanned the room, looking for Marcus, but his brother-in-law had disappeared into a circle of executives 20 minutes ago and hadn't resurfaced. Daniel sighed. He could leave. Marcus probably wouldn't even notice. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the guilt of bailing early. Maybe it was the faint hope that Marcus was right, that he needed something beyond the narrow corridor his life had become. Or maybe it was just stubbornness. Whatever it was, Daniel stayed. On the opposite side of the ballroom, Evelyn Grant stood in the center of a carefully constructed performance. She smiled at the right moments, laughed at mediocre jokes, nodded thoughtfully when board members droned on about quarterly projections and market expansion. She wore a midnight blue gown that had been tailored to perfection, her dark hair swept into an elegant updo, diamond earrings catching the light with every slight turn of her head. To everyone watching, she was the picture of confidence, poise, control. Inside, she felt like she was drowning. "Evelyn, darling, you simply must tell me about the Singapore deal," Margaret Ashford cooed, her voice sticky sweet and laced with the kind of false interest that made Evelyn's jaw tighten. "I heard it's the largest acquisition Grant Industries has ever made." "It's progressing well," Evelyn replied smoothly, offering nothing more. Margaret waited for elaboration, her smile thinning when none came. "Well, I'm sure it's all terribly complicated. Richard was just saying how impressed he is with your leadership. So rare to see a woman at the helm of such a demanding empire." There it is, Evelyn thought, the subtle dig wrapped in a compliment. The implication that her success was an anomaly, something remarkable because she was a woman, not because she was capable. She'd heard variations of this her entire career. At 34, she'd become the youngest CEO in Grant Industries' 70-year history, taking over after her father's sudden heart attack had left the company in chaos. She'd stabilized it, expanded it, and tripled its value in 5 years. But none of that mattered to people like Margaret Ashford. To them, she would always be playing dress-up in her father's office. "Thank you, Margaret," Evelyn said, her tone gracious but final. "If you'll excuse me, I need to speak with someone." She didn't wait for a response. She simply turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the marble with a rhythm that suggested purpose even when she had none. The truth was, she didn't need to speak with anyone. She needed to breathe. Evelyn navigated through the crowd with practiced ease, smiling and nodding at familiar faces but not stopping. She'd perfected the art of looking engaged while remaining unreachable. It was a survival skill she'd honed over years of being in rooms where everyone wanted something from her. A favor, a connection, a piece of her empire. No one asked how she was. No one cared. She reached the far side of the ballroom where the crowd thinned near a set of tall windows overlooking the city. The space was quieter here, less suffocating. Evelyn exhaled slowly, her shoulders dropping just a fraction. "Are you okay?" The voice startled her. She turned to find Jessica Tran, her executive assistant and one of the few people she actually trusted. "I'm fine," Evelyn said automatically. Jessica raised an eyebrow. She was in her late 20s, sharp as a blade, and had been with Evelyn long enough to know when she was lying. "You've been doing the escape and evade thing for the last hour. That's usually a sign you're about 3 seconds from bailing." Evelyn almost smiled. "I can't bail. This is my event. Technically, it's the Grant Foundation's event. You just have to show up and look like you care." "I do care." "About the cause? Yes. About this circus?" Jessica gestured at the room. "Not so much." Evelyn didn't argue. The charity gala was raising money for youth education programs, something she genuinely believed in, but the event itself was exhausting. It was theater, a performance where everyone played their roles and pretended the money mattered more than the networking. "2 more hours," Evelyn murmured. "You can do 2 hours," Jessica said encouragingly. "And then you can go home, take off that dress, and binge whatever trashy reality show you're pretending you don't watch." That did make Evelyn smile. "It's not trashy. It's a psychological study in human behavior." "Sure it is," Jessica grinned. "You want me to run interference with Margaret and her crew?" "Please." Jessica gave her a mock salute and disappeared back into the crowd, leaving Evelyn alone by the windows. She stared out at the city skyline, the lights of Manhattan stretching endlessly in every direction. From up here, the world looked orderly, beautiful even. But Evelyn knew better. She knew the chaos that lived beneath the surface, the late-night emails, the impossible decisions, the loneliness that came with being at the top. She had everything most people dreamed of: wealth, power, influence. But she couldn't remember the last time she'd felt alive. Daniel had made it another 30 minutes before deciding he was done. He'd tried. He'd smiled politely at strangers, made awkward small talk about nothing, and endured a 10-minute conversation with a man who'd spent the entire time bragging about his yacht. But enough was enough. He pulled out his phone to text Marcus, letting him know he was heading out, when a waiter carrying a tray of champagne flutes stumbled directly into his path. Daniel reacted instinctively, stepping back to avoid the collision, but his heel caught on the edge of a decorative rug. His arms flailed briefly before he steadied himself, but not before bumping into someone behind him. "I'm so sorry," he started, turning, and then he stopped. The woman he'd bumped into was stunning, not in the overdone magazine cover way that seemed to dominate the room, but in a way that was real. She had dark eyes that held a sharpness tempered by exhaustion, high cheekbones, and an expression that suggested she was just as out of place as he felt, even though she clearly belonged here. She wore a midnight blue gown that looked like it cost more than his truck, and diamond earrings that caught the light when she tilted her head slightly. "It's fine," she said, her voice calm and measured. Daniel noticed she'd been holding a glass of champagne, and a small amount had spilled onto her hand. "Here." He fumbled for a napkin from a nearby table and handed it to her. She took it with a faint smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thank you." "I really am sorry," Daniel said. "I wasn't paying attention." "Neither was I." She dabbed at her hand, then glanced at him. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else." Daniel blinked, caught off guard by the observation. That obvious? Only to someone who feels the same way. There was something disarming about her honesty. Most people at this event wore masks, pleasant, polished, impenetrable, but this woman's exhaustion was palpable, like she'd forgotten to hide it. "First time at one of these?" she asked. "Is it that obvious?" A real smile flickered across her face, brief but genuine. "You're standing alone, holding water instead of champagne, and you look like you're calculating the fastest exit route." "So, yes," Daniel couldn't help but laugh. "Guilty. My brother-in-law dragged me here. I'm counting the minutes until I can leave without feeling like a terrible person." "I've been counting too," she admitted. "Yeah? What's your count at?" 1 hour and 43 minutes. "I'm at 1 hour and 56 minutes, Daniel said. "Looks like you're winning." She laughed, soft and unexpected, like she'd surprised herself. "I don't think anyone wins at these things." Before Daniel could respond, a woman in a red dress appeared beside them, her expression bright and invasive. "Evelyn, there you are. I've been looking everywhere for you." The woman beside him, Evelyn, stiffened almost imperceptibly. The mask slid back into place, her expression shifting from open to politely distant in the span of a heartbeat. "Hello, Caroline," Evelyn said. Caroline didn't seem to notice the shift. She launched into a breathless monologue about someone's vacation in the south of France, her words tumbling over each other in a way that suggested she wasn't particularly interested in whether anyone was listening. Daniel took a step back, recognizing the moment for what it was, a conversation he had no part in. But before he could slip away entirely, Evelyn's eyes flicked to him. There was something in her gaze, an apology maybe, or a plea for rescue. But then Caroline swept her away, and Evelyn disappeared back into the crowd. Daniel stood there for a moment, feeling oddly unmoored. He didn't know who she was, but something about that brief interaction lingered. Maybe it was the honesty, or the way she'd looked just as trapped as he felt. Whatever it was, it stayed with him as he finally made his way toward the exit. Evelyn managed to extricate herself from Caroline after 15 excruciating minutes of one-sided conversation about interior designers and private chefs. By the time she escaped, her patience was worn thin, and the mask she wore felt heavier than ever. She needed air. The balcony Gerald Finch had mentioned to Daniel earlier was tucked away on the east side of the ballroom, accessible through a set of French doors that most guests didn't notice. Evelyn had discovered it during the venue walkthrough weeks ago, and she'd filed it away as a potential escape route. Now, she pushed through the doors and stepped into the cool night air. The balcony overlooked the city, the skyline glittering against the dark sky. The noise of the gala faded to a muffled hum behind her, replaced by the distant sounds of traffic and the occasional siren. Evelyn leaned against the stone railing, closing her eyes and letting the breeze wash over her. For the first time all night, she felt like she could breathe. "Escaping too?" Evelyn's eyes snapped open. She turned to find the man from earlier, the one she'd bumped into, standing near the door. He held his borrowed suit jacket over one arm, His tie loosened, and he looked as relieved to be outside as she felt. "I thought you'd left," she said. "I was going to," Daniel admitted, stepping closer but keeping a respectful distance. "But I got waylaid by someone asking if I knew anything about cryptocurrency. Figured the balcony was safer than trying to explain I barely understand my own bank account." Evelyn laughed despite herself. "Cryptocurrency. The ultimate party conversation. Right up there with real estate and golf." Daniel leaned against the railing a few feet away from her. His posture relaxed in a way that felt genuine. "I'm Daniel, by the way. Daniel Brooks." "Evelyn," she said, deliberately leaving off her last name. For once, she wanted to be just Evelyn. Not Evelyn Grant, CEO, heiress, public figure. "Nice to officially meet you, Evelyn." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, the city stretching out before them. "So," Daniel said eventually, "what's your excuse for being here?" "Excuse? You said you were counting the minutes too. If this isn't your scene, why come?" Evelyn hesitated. The real answer was complicated. Duty, expectation, the weight of a name she'd been born into. But something about the way Daniel asked, without agenda or pretense, made her want to be honest. "Obligation," she said finally. "This is my foundation's event. I have to be here." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Your foundation?" "The Grant Foundation. We fund education programs for underserved communities." Recognition flickered across his face. "Wait, Grant? As in Grant Industries?" Evelyn braced herself for the shift. This was usually where people's demeanor changed, where they became overly polite, overly interested, or overly intimidated, where the mask became necessary. But Daniel just nodded slowly. "Huh. So you're not just stuck here. You're hosting this." "Technically, yes." "That's rough." Evelyn blinked. "Rough?" "Yeah, I mean, at least I can bail whenever I want. You're stuck until the bitter end." It wasn't the reaction she'd expected, and it startled a laugh out of her. "I hadn't thought of it that way, but yes, I suppose I am." Daniel smiled. "For what it's worth, the cause is solid. My daughter's school benefits from programs like yours. Makes a real difference." "You have a daughter?" "Lily. She's 6. His expression softened in a way that was impossible to fake. "She's the reason I do pretty much everything." Evelyn felt something tighten in her chest, a pang of something she couldn't quite name. Envy, maybe, or longing. "That must be nice, having someone who matters that much." Daniel glanced at her, and for a moment his gaze was searching. "You don't?" The question was simple, but it hit harder than it should have. Evelyn looked back at the city, her fingers tightening on the railing. "I have responsibilities, people who depend on me professionally. But it's not the same." "No," Daniel said quietly. "It's not." They fell into silence again, but this time it felt heavier, more honest. "Can I ask you something?" Evelyn said after a while. "Sure." "Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life, like you're going through the motions, but none of it feels real?" Daniel considered the question carefully. "Yeah. After my wife died, everything felt like that for a long time, like I was just surviving, going through the motions because that's what you do." Evelyn turned to look at him, her expression softening. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "It's okay," Daniel said. "It was 4 years ago, and honestly, I don't think I'm just surviving anymore. Lily changed that. She made things real again." Evelyn nodded, but she didn't say anything. She couldn't. Because the truth was, she didn't have a Lily. She didn't have anyone who made things feel real. She had an empire, a legacy, a name that carried weight. But she didn't have this, whatever this was. "I've never even been kissed," she said suddenly, the words slipping out before she could stop them. She froze, horrified. She hadn't meant to say it out loud. It was a thought, a fleeting moment of vulnerability she'd never intended to share. But it was too late. Daniel didn't laugh, didn't look shocked or judgmental. He just looked at her, really looked at her, and in his eyes she saw something she hadn't expected, understanding. "That's not what I expected to hear tonight," he said gently. Evelyn's cheeks flushed. "I don't know why I said that. I'm sorry." "That was human," Daniel finished. "It was human." She met his gaze, and for the first time all night, she didn't feel like a CEO or a public figure or a grant. She felt like a person, messy and uncertain and achingly real. "I'm 34, she said quietly. "I've built an empire. I've closed billion-dollar deals. I've stood in front of boardrooms full of men who wanted me to fail, and I've proven them wrong every single time. But I've never had time for anything else. I've never let anyone close enough." Daniel didn't say anything. He just listened, his expression steady and open. "And now I look around," Evelyn continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I realize I don't even know what I've been working toward. I have everything I thought I wanted, but I don't have this." She gestured vaguely at the space between them. Connection. Something real. The silence that followed was heavy, but not uncomfortable. Finally, Daniel spoke. "For what it's worth, I think you're brave." Evelyn frowned. "Brave?" "Yeah, it takes guts to admit you don't have it all figured out. Most people fake it their whole lives." Evelyn's throat tightened. She didn't trust herself to speak. Daniel straightened, adjusting his jacket over his arm. "I should probably go. I told my neighbor I'd be home by 10, and it's already past that." "Of course," Evelyn said, pulling herself together. "Thank you for this, for listening. Anytime." Daniel gave her a small, genuine smile. "Good luck with the rest of the night." He turned to leave, but before he reached the door, Evelyn called out, "Daniel?" He stopped, glancing back. "Do you think—" She hesitated, then forced herself to continue. "Do you think it's too late? To have something real?" Daniel looked at her for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "No," he said finally. "I don't think it's ever too late." And then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. Evelyn stood alone on the balcony, the city lights blurring as her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. For the first time in years, she felt something other than emptiness. She felt hope. Daniel woke to the sound of Lily's laughter echoing from the kitchen. He groaned, rolling over to check the clock on his nightstand. 6:47 a.m. On a Saturday, of course. "Daddy!" Lily's voice rang out. "Mrs. Chen is making pancakes." Daniel smiled despite his exhaustion. He dragged himself out of bed, pulled on a worn t-shirt and sweatpants, and padded down the hallway of their small two-bedroom apartment. Mrs. Chen stood at the stove, expertly flipping pancakes, while Lily sat at the kitchen table, swinging her legs and chattering about her plans for the day. The older woman caught sight of Daniel and gave him a knowing look. "You look terrible," she said bluntly. "Good morning to you too, Mrs. Chen," Daniel replied, pouring himself a cup of coffee from the pot she'd already made. "Late night?" "Later than I planned." Lily looked up from her coloring book, her eyes bright. "Did you have fun at the fancy party, Daddy?" Daniel ruffled her hair as he sat down beside her. "It was interesting." "Did you dance?" "No dancing." "Did you eat fancy food?" "A little." Lily frowned, clearly disappointed by his lackluster answers. "Sounds boring." "It kind of was," Daniel admitted. Mrs. Chen set a plate of pancakes in front of him, then one in front of Lily. "Well, you survived. That's what matters." Daniel ate in silence, his thoughts drifting back to the night before, to the woman on the balcony, Evelyn. He didn't even know her last name. Well, he did, but only because she'd mentioned her foundation. Evelyn Grant. He'd looked it up on his phone during the ride home, half curious, half disbelieving. The search results had been overwhelming. Articles about her taking over Grant Industries, photos from charity events and business conferences, a Forbes profile calling her one of the most influential women in tech. She wasn't just successful, she was powerful. And she'd told him, a stranger in a borrowed suit, that she'd never been kissed. Daniel shook his head, trying to dislodge the memory. It didn't matter. He'd probably never see her again. Their worlds didn't overlap. Last night had been a fluke, a brief moment of connection that would fade like everything else. "Daddy, you're being weird," Lily said, pulling him back to the present. "Weird how?" "You're staring at your pancakes like they did something bad." Mrs. Chen chuckled from the stove. Daniel forced a smile. "Sorry, kiddo, just tired." Lily accepted this with a shrug and went back to her coloring book, humming a tune from one of her favorite movies. Mrs. Chen sat down across from him, her sharp eyes studying his face. "You met someone." Daniel nearly choked on his coffee. "What?" "At the party. You met someone." "I don't know what you're talking about." "You have that look. The same look my husband had when he first met me, like someone knocked the wind out of him, and he's still trying to figure out how to breathe." Daniel set down his mug, his expression guarded. "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" He hesitated, then sighed. "I bumped into someone. We talked for a few minutes. That's it." "And?" "And nothing. She's not someone I'll see again." Mrs. Chen raised an eyebrow. "Because you don't want to? Or because you're scared?" Daniel didn't answer. Mrs. Chen reached across the table and patted his hand. "You're a good man, Daniel, a good father, but you're allowed to have a life too." "I have a life." "You have a routine," she corrected gently. "There's a difference." Before Daniel could respond, Lily piped up. "Mrs. Chen says you need a girlfriend." Daniel's eyes widened. "Mrs. Chen, what are you telling my daughter?" The older woman grinned, utterly unrepentant. "Just the truth." Lily giggled, clearly enjoying the chaos she'd unleashed. Daniel groaned, burying his face in his hands. This is not happening. But even as he said it, his thoughts drifted back to the balcony, to dark eyes in a midnight blue gown, to a woman who'd looked just as lost as he'd felt. And for the first time in years, Daniel wondered if maybe, just maybe, Mrs. Chen was right. By Monday morning, Evelyn had convinced herself that the encounter on the balcony had been a momentary lapse in judgment. She'd been tired, overwhelmed. She'd let her guard down with a stranger, and while it had felt nice, it didn't mean anything. People had fleeting conversations at events all the time. It didn't have to be significant, except she couldn't stop thinking about it. She sat in her corner office on the 43rd floor of Grant Tower, staring at the contract on her desk without really seeing it. Her assistant, Jessica, had brought it in an hour ago, along with a stack of other documents that required her signature. But Evelyn's focus kept slipping. "I've never even been kissed." Why had she said that? To a complete stranger, no less. It was humiliating, unprofessional, weak. And yet, Daniel hadn't made her feel weak. He'd made her feel seen. A knock on the door jolted her from her thoughts. "Come in," she called, straightening in her chair. Jessica entered, carrying a tablet and a coffee. "Morning update. The Singapore deal is moving forward. Legal wants to meet Wednesday to finalize terms. You have lunch with the mayor at noon and the board meeting is at 3. Also, your mother called. Twice." Evelyn suppressed a groan. What does she want? She didn't say, but she sounded persistent. She always does. Evelyn took the coffee gratefully. "Anything else?" Jessica hesitated, then set the tablet on the desk. "Actually, yes. I got a call this morning from someone asking about volunteer opportunities with the foundation." "That's not unusual." "No, but this one was specific. He said he met you at the gala Saturday night and wanted to know if there were ways to get involved. I thought you'd want to know." Evelyn's pulse quickened. "Did he leave a name?" "Daniel Brooks." For a moment, Evelyn forgot how to breathe. Jessica was watching her carefully, her expression curious. "Do you know him?" We spoke briefly at the event," Evelyn said, keeping her voice neutral. "He seemed genuine, said he has a daughter who benefits from programs like ours and wanted to give back." Jessica paused. "I can follow up if you want, or just add him to the general volunteer list." Evelyn's mind raced. This was ridiculous. She shouldn't care. Daniel Brooks was a stranger who'd wandered into her life for 10 minutes and would wander right back out. Getting involved, pursuing this in any way, was a terrible idea. But even as she thought it, she heard herself say, "Give me his contact information." Jessica's eyebrows shot up. "You want to reach out directly?" "I'll handle it," Evelyn said firmly. Jessica didn't argue, but the knowing look in her eyes said everything. After she left, Evelyn stared at the name and phone number on the tablet screen. Daniel Brooks. She could ignore this, delete the information, move on with her carefully controlled life. Or she picked up her phone before she could talk herself out of it. The call rang 3 times before he answered. "Hello?" His voice was the same, warm, grounded, real. Daniel, this is Evelyn. Evelyn Grant. We met at the gala Saturday night. There was a pause, then a soft exhale. I didn't think I'd hear from you. Neither did I, she admitted. But my assistant said you called about the foundation. Yeah, I've been thinking about what you said, about the programs you fund. I wanted to help. If there's a way I can. Evelyn's chest tightened. That's kind of you. It's selfish, actually. I've been stuck in my own head for a while now. Thought maybe doing something for someone else might help. She didn't know what to say to that. So instead she said, would you want to meet to talk about it? Another pause. Longer this time. Yeah, Daniel said finally. I'd like that. Evelyn exhaled, her grip on the phone tightening. There's a coffee shop near Bryant Park. Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock? I'll be there. When the call ended, Evelyn set the phone down and stared at it like it might explode. What was she doing? She didn't have time for this. For him. Her life was already complicated enough without adding whatever this was. But as she returned to the contract on her desk, she found herself smiling. And for once, she didn't try to stop it. The coffee shop was tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop, the kind of place that survived on regulars rather than foot traffic. Daniel arrived 10 minutes early, his hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets, his breath misting in the cold November air. He'd debated canceling 3 times that morning, once while making Lily breakfast, once while dropping her off at school, and once more while parking his truck 2 blocks away. But here he was. Through the window, he could see mismatched furniture, exposed brick walls, and a chalkboard menu written in looping cursive. It looked nothing like the places Evelyn Grant probably frequented. He almost turned around. Then he saw her. She sat at a corner table, her coat draped over the back of her chair, a ceramic mug cradled between her hands. She wore a simple cream sweater and dark jeans. No diamonds, no designer labels. Her hair was down, falling in loose waves past her shoulders. She looked younger somehow, more accessible, and she was staring at the door like she might bolt at any second. Daniel took a breath and pushed inside. The bell above the door chimed, and Evelyn's head snapped up. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then she smiled, small and uncertain, but real, and Daniel felt something in his chest loosen. Hi, he said, crossing to her table. Hi. She gestured to the chair across from her. I wasn't sure you'd come. I wasn't sure either, Daniel admitted, sitting down. But I figured standing you up would be worse than whatever awkwardness this turns into. A laugh escaped her, quick and surprised. That's honest. I don't really know how to be anything else. The barista appeared beside them, a young woman with pink hair and a nose ring. What can I get you? Daniel glanced at the menu board. Just a black coffee, thanks. Anything to eat? The cinnamon rolls are fresh. He hesitated, then shook his head. Coffee's good. When the barista left, Evelyn tilted her head slightly. You don't like cinnamon rolls? I'm trying not to spend money I don't need to spend, Daniel said simply. Most people would have stumbled over that admission, made excuses, or changed the subject. But Evelyn just nodded, like she understood the weight of it. I already ordered 2, she said. I was nervous, so I over-ordered. You'd be doing me a favor. Daniel's mouth twitched. That's a terrible excuse. It's the truth. Fine. But only because you're nervous. Deal. The barista returned with his coffee and a plate holding 2 massive cinnamon rolls, their icing still warm and glistening. Daniel picked one up and took a bite. It was obscenely good. Okay, he said after swallowing. You were right to be nervous. If I'd known these existed, I would have ordered 3. Evelyn smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. They sat in silence for a moment, the kind that felt less awkward than it should have. Around them, the coffee shop hummed with quiet conversation and the hiss of the espresso machine. It was ordinary, comfortable. So, Evelyn said eventually, wrapping her hands around her mug again, you called about volunteering. I did. Why? Daniel considered the question. He could give her the easy answer, the one he'd rehearsed on the drive over. Something about wanting to give back, about Lily's school, about civic responsibility, but sitting across from her now, those words felt hollow. Because I haven't stopped thinking about what you said, he admitted. On the balcony. About not having something real. Evelyn's expression shifted, surprise flickering across her features. I know what that feels like, Daniel continued. After my wife died, I spent 2 years just existing, going through the motions. And it wasn't until Lily started asking questions I couldn't answer that I realized I'd stopped living. I'd stopped trying. He paused, his gaze steady on hers. I don't know you, but I recognized that look. And I thought, maybe I could help, or maybe you could help me. I don't know. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. That's the most honest thing anyone's said to me in years, she said finally. Yeah? Yeah. She looked up, her dark eyes searching his face. Most people want something from me. Access, connections, money, but you're not asking for any of that. I don't need any of that. I know, that's what makes this so strange. Daniel leaned back in his chair, his coffee halfway to his lips. What's strange about it? I don't know how to talk to someone who doesn't want anything from me. The vulnerability in her voice was raw, unguarded. It reminded Daniel of the way she'd looked on the balcony, like she was carrying a weight no one else could see. Then let's start simple, Daniel said. Tell me something true. Something that has nothing to do with work or money or any of that. Evelyn blinked. Like what? Anything. A memory. A fear. Something you've never told anyone. She hesitated, her fingers tightening around her mug. Then slowly, she began to speak. When I was 7, my father took me to the office for the first time. I thought it would be exciting, seeing where he worked, meeting important people. But mostly, I just remember feeling small. Everyone was in a hurry, no one smiled, and my father, he wasn't the same man he was at home. He was colder, sharper. She paused, her gaze distant. I asked him why everyone looked so serious, and he said, because this is where we build empires, Evelyn. And empires aren't built by people who smile. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. I never forgot that, Evelyn continued. And I think I've been trying to prove him right ever since. That success means sacrifice. That you can't have both, an empire and a life. Do you believe that? Daniel asked quietly. Evelyn met his gaze, and for the first time he saw doubt flicker in her eyes. I don't know, she whispered. I used to, but now, I'm not so sure. Daniel set down his coffee, leaning forward slightly. Can I tell you something? Please. My wife, Sarah. She used to say that life is just a series of moments, and the moments that matter aren't the big ones. They're the small ones, the ones you don't plan for. He smiled faintly, like burnt pancakes on a Sunday morning, or staying up too late because your kid won't stop asking why. Or sitting in a coffee shop with someone you barely know, eating cinnamon rolls and talking about things you've never said out loud. Evelyn's eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. Those moments don't build empires, Daniel said. But they build something better. They build a life. The silence that followed was heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that held meaning, the kind that didn't need to be filled with words. Finally, Evelyn exhaled, her shoulders dropping as if she'd been holding her breath for years. I don't know how to do that, she admitted. Build a life, I mean. I've spent so long building everything else that I don't even know where to start. Daniel smiled. You start small, one moment at a time. And what if I mess it up? Then you mess it up, and you try again. Evelyn laughed softly, shaking her head. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple, but it's not impossible either. She looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she picked up her cinnamon roll and took a bite, her eyes never leaving his. Okay, she said quietly. One moment at a time. The coffee shop visit stretched into 2 hours. They talked about everything and nothing. Lily's obsession with unicorns, Evelyn's failed attempts at learning to cook, Daniel's disastrous first date after Sarah's death, Evelyn's complicated relationship with her mother. They laughed more than Daniel had in months, and by the time they stood to leave, the weight he'd carried into the shop felt lighter. Outside, the November wind bit at their skin, and Evelyn pulled her coat tighter around herself. I should get to the office, she said, though she didn't move. And I should pick up Lily from school, Daniel replied, also not moving. They stood there on the sidewalk, the city rushing past them, neither quite ready to let the moment end. Can I see you again? Evelyn asked suddenly, the words tumbling out before she could second-guess them. Daniel's eyes widened slightly. You want to? Yes, I don't know what this is, but I don't want it to end yet. Daniel smiled, slow and genuine. Neither do I. Friday? Evelyn suggested. There's a park near my apartment. We could walk, talk. I'll have Lily with me. Evelyn's expression softened. I'd like to meet her. Something in Daniel's chest cracked open at that. He nodded, not trusting his voice. Friday then, Evelyn said. Friday. She turned to leave, then hesitated. Without thinking, she reached out and squeezed his hand, brief and tentative, but deliberate. Thank you, she said, for this. And then she was gone, disappearing into the crowd, leaving Daniel standing alone on the sidewalk with the phantom warmth of her touch still lingering on his skin. Friday arrived with a crystalline blue sky and air so cold it hurt to breathe. Daniel stood at the entrance to Riverside Park, Lily bouncing beside him in her pink winter coat and mismatched mittens. Is she nice? Lily asked for the third time. Very nice, Daniel assured her. Is she pretty? Yes. Is she going to be your girlfriend? Daniel nearly choked. Lily, Mrs. Chen says you need a girlfriend, Lily said matter-of-factly, and that you're too scared to get one. Mrs. Chen talks too much. Lily giggled, swinging his hand. I like Mrs. Chen. So do I, kiddo, but she doesn't need to share every opinion she has. Before Lily could respond, Daniel spotted Evelyn walking toward them. She wore a long gray coat, a burgundy scarf, and boots that looked warm but not ostentatious. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she carried 2 paper cups. Hi, she said, stopping a few feet away. Her gaze dropped to Lily, and her expression softened. You must be Lily. Lily tilted her head, studying Evelyn with the unfiltered scrutiny only 6-year-olds could manage. You're really pretty. Evelyn blinked, clearly caught off guard. Then she smiled. Thank you. So are you. I know, Lily said confidently. Daddy tells me all the time. Daniel groaned. Lily, come on. Evelyn laughed, a real, unguarded sound. She held out one of the paper cups. I brought hot chocolate. I wasn't sure if you'd want coffee, so I guessed. Daniel took the cup, his fingers brushing hers. Hot chocolate's perfect. Thank you. Can I have some? Lily asked. I brought one for you, too, Evelyn said, producing a smaller cup from her coat pocket. But it might be too hot still. We should wait a few minutes. Lily's eyes lit up. You brought me one? Of course. Lily looked up at Daniel, her expression gleeful. I like her, Daddy. Daniel felt his face heat. That's great, Lily. They started walking, Lily skipping ahead to examine every leaf and stick she found interesting. Evelyn and Daniel followed at a slower pace, their steps falling into an easy rhythm. She's wonderful, Evelyn said quietly. She's a handful, Daniel replied, though his voice was full of affection. But yeah, she's pretty great. Does she know about her mother? Daniel nodded. As much as she can understand at 6. I've tried to be honest with her. Told her that her mom loved her, but that sometimes people get sick and don't get better. She asks questions sometimes. Hard ones. But we figure it out together. That must be difficult. It is. But it's also necessary. I don't want her to grow up with gaps in her story. I want her to know where she came from, even if it's painful. Evelyn was quiet for a moment, watching Lily crouch down to inspect something on the ground. You're a good father. Daniel shrugged. I'm trying. That's all I can do. They walked in silence for a while, the park stretching out around them. Trees stood bare against the sky, their branches skeletal and stark. A few joggers passed by, their breath misting in the cold air. Somewhere in the distance a dog barked. Can I ask you something? Evelyn said eventually. Sure. Why did you agree to this? To meet me again? You don't know me, and from what I can tell, your life is already full. Daniel considered the question. He could deflect, give her something vague and non-committal, but that wasn't what this was, because when I'm with you, I don't feel like I'm just surviving anymore, he said. I feel like I'm living, and I haven't felt that in a long time. Evelyn stopped walking, turning to face him. Her dark eyes searched his, and for a moment the world narrowed to just the two of them. "I feel the same way," she whispered. Before Daniel could respond, Lily came running back, her cheeks flushed from the cold. "Daddy! Evelyn! Look what I found!" She held up a pine cone like it was treasure. Evelyn crouched down to Lily's level, her expression genuinely interested. "That's a beautiful pine cone." "Do you want it?" Lily asked. "I'd love it." Lily beamed and handed it over. Evelyn accepted it with the same reverence Lily had shown, tucking it carefully into her coat pocket. "Thank you, Lily," Evelyn said. "I'll keep it safe." Lily grinned, then grabbed Evelyn's hand without hesitation. "Come on, I want to show you the ducks." And just like that, Lily dragged Evelyn toward the pond, chattering the entire way. Daniel followed, watching the two of them together. Lily's unfiltered joy and Evelyn's tentative warmth, and felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just a fleeting connection anymore. This was something real. They spent the next hour at the park. Lily fed the ducks with stale bread Daniel had brought. Evelyn asked questions about Lily's favorite things, and Daniel watched them both with a mixture of wonder and fear. By the time they left, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Lily yawned, leaning heavily against Daniel's leg. "She's exhausted," Daniel said apologetically. "She's perfect," Evelyn replied. They walked toward the park exit in comfortable silence, Lily holding both their hands and swinging between them. "Can Evelyn come to dinner?" Lily asked suddenly. Daniel's eyes widened. "Lily, I'm sure Evelyn has—" "I'd love to," Evelyn interrupted. Daniel stared at her. "You don't have to, really." "I want to." Her gaze was steady, sincere. "If that's okay." Daniel looked down at Lily, who was practically vibrating with excitement, then back at Evelyn. "Okay," he said. "But I'm warning you, I'm not a great cook." Evelyn smiled. "Neither am I. We'll figure it out." Daniel's apartment was small but warm, the kind of place that felt lived in rather than decorated. Toys were scattered across the living room floor, crayon drawings covered the refrigerator, and a stack of library books teetered on the coffee table. It was chaotic and imperfect, and nothing like the world Evelyn came from. But it felt like home. "Sorry about the mess," Daniel said, kicking a stuffed giraffe out of the way. "Don't apologize," Evelyn said, looking around. "It's perfect." Lily dragged Evelyn to the couch and immediately launched into a story about her day at school, complete with dramatic reenactments. Evelyn listened intently, asking questions and laughing at all the right moments. Meanwhile, Daniel rummaged through the kitchen, trying to figure out what he could make with the limited ingredients he had. He settled on spaghetti, simple, familiar, and hard to mess up. "Need help?" Evelyn asked, appearing in the doorway. "You're supposed to be relaxing." "I've been relaxing all day. Let me help." Daniel hesitated, then handed her a cutting board and a tomato. "Can you dice this?" "I can try." She was terrible at it. The pieces were uneven, some too large and others nearly pulverized. But she worked with a focus that made Daniel smile. "You weren't kidding about not knowing how to cook," he said. "I told you." "How do you survive?" "Takeout? And a personal chef when I'm desperate." Daniel laughed. "A personal chef, right. Don't judge me." "I'm not judging. I'm just adjusting my expectations." Evelyn grinned, and something about the ease between them made Daniel's chest ache. Dinner was chaotic. Lily spilled her juice twice, the spaghetti was slightly overcooked, and Evelyn accidentally knocked over the salt shaker. But none of it mattered. They laughed through the mess, and by the time they finished eating, Daniel couldn't remember the last time his apartment had felt this full. After dinner, Lily insisted on showing Evelyn her room, a whirlwind of pink and purple, stuffed animals piled high on the bed, and drawings taped to every available surface. "This is my favorite," Lily said, pointing to a crayon drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands. "That's me, Daddy, and Mommy." Evelyn knelt down, studying the drawing carefully. "It's beautiful, Lily." "Mommy's in heaven now," Lily said matter-of-factly. "But Daddy says she's always watching." Evelyn glanced at Daniel, who stood in the doorway, his expression tight. "I'm sure she is," Evelyn said gently, "and I'm sure she's very proud of you." Lily smiled, satisfied with that answer, and moved on to the next drawing. Later, after Lily had been tucked into bed and Daniel had read her 3 stories, he and Evelyn sat on the couch, the apartment quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. "She's incredible," Evelyn said. "She is. And so are you." Daniel looked at her, surprised. "I'm really not." "You are." Evelyn's voice was firm. "You've built a life for her, a good one, and you've done it on your own. That's not nothing, Daniel." Daniel didn't know what to say to that, so instead he reached out and took her hand. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for being here, for all of this." Evelyn squeezed his hand, her thumb brushing over his knuckles. "Thank you for letting me in." They sat like that for a long time, the silence between them comfortable and full. And for the first time in years, Daniel let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, he deserved this. The weeks that followed unfolded in a rhythm neither of them had expected. Coffee became a Tuesday morning ritual. Daniel would drop Lily at school, then meet Evelyn at the same corner shop where they'd first sat together. Sometimes they talked about work, but more often they talked about nothing and everything. Evelyn learned that Daniel had wanted to be an architect before life had taken him in a different direction. Daniel learned that Evelyn played piano but hadn't touched one in years because there was never time. On Saturdays, they walked. Sometimes just the 2 of them, sometimes with Lily skipping ahead, her laughter punctuating the quiet conversations they shared. Evelyn started keeping a collection of things Lily gave her: pine cones, smooth stones from the park, a drawing of a butterfly that now sat framed on her office desk where only she could see it. It was simple, uncomplicated in a way that felt almost fragile. And then, on a cold December evening, everything shifted. Daniel stood outside Evelyn's building, his hands shoved deep in his coat pockets, his breath misting in the freezing air. The address she'd given him led to a high-rise in the financial district, all glass and steel and doormen in pristine uniforms. He felt wildly out of place. He'd debated turning around 3 times already, but Evelyn had invited him. She'd called him 2 nights ago, her voice tentative but hopeful, and asked if he'd come to dinner at her place, just the 2 of them. Lily was spending the night with Mrs. Chen, who'd practically pushed Daniel out the door when he'd mentioned the invitation. "Go," she'd said, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Live a little." So here he was, staring up at a building that probably cost more per month than he made in a year, wondering what the hell he was doing. The doorman noticed him hovering and approached with a polite but cautious expression. "Can I help you, sir?" "I'm here to see Evelyn Grant," Daniel said. "She's expecting me." The doorman checked a list, then nodded. 42nd floor. The elevator is through the lobby." Daniel thanked him and stepped inside. The lobby was all marble and modern art, the kind of space that made him hyper-aware of his worn boots and second-hand coat. He rode the elevator alone, watching the numbers climb higher and higher until they reached 42. When the doors opened, Evelyn was waiting. She stood in the hallway, barefoot, wearing dark jeans and a soft gray sweater that made her look younger, less guarded. Her hair was down, falling in loose waves, and she wasn't wearing any makeup. She looked beautiful. "Hi," she said, her smile nervous but genuine. "Hi," Daniel replied, stepping out of the elevator. "I was worried you'd change your mind." "I almost did. 3 times. Evelyn laughed softly. "I'm glad you didn't." She led him into her apartment and Daniel's breath caught. The space was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, the lights glittering like stars against the dark sky. The furniture was sleek and modern, all clean lines and neutral tones. Everything looked expensive, untouched, like a showroom rather than a home. "It's too much, isn't it?" Evelyn said quietly, watching his reaction. Daniel turned to her. "It's beautiful. But it's not a home." He didn't argue, because she was right. The apartment was stunning, but it felt empty. Cold. There were no photos on the walls, no books scattered on the coffee table, no signs that anyone actually lived here. "I don't spend much time here," Evelyn admitted, as if reading his thoughts. "Mostly I just sleep here, sometimes I work, but it's never felt like yours does." Daniel's chest tightened. "My place is a mess." "Your place is alive," Evelyn corrected. "This is just a place." She gestured toward the open kitchen, where ingredients were laid out on the counter: vegetables, pasta, a bottle of wine. "I thought we could cook together, or try to." I'm warning you now, it might be a disaster. Daniel smiled. I'm willing to risk it. They moved into the kitchen, and Evelyn pulled out a recipe she'd printed from the internet. It was for a simple pasta dish with roasted vegetables, but the instructions might as well have been written in another language for all the confidence Evelyn had in following them. Okay, she said, studying the paper. First, we need to chop the vegetables. I can do that, Daniel offered. No, I want to learn. She picked up a knife, then looked at it like it might bite her. How hard can it be? 20 minutes later, the kitchen was chaos. Evelyn had nearly cut her finger twice. Daniel had accidentally knocked over a bowl of cherry tomatoes that rolled across the floor, and the garlic had somehow ended up burning in the pan, despite neither of them touching it. This is a disaster, Evelyn said, laughing as she tried to salvage the garlic. I told you I wasn't a great cook. You're better than me. That's not saying much. Evelyn swatted his arm playfully, and Daniel caught her wrist, holding it gently. They stood there close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes, close enough that the space between them felt charged. Hi, he said softly. Hi, she whispered back. Neither of them moved. The moment stretched, fragile and electric, until Evelyn finally stepped back, her cheeks flushed. We should finish cooking, she said, her voice unsteady. Daniel nodded, releasing her wrist. Right, cooking. They managed to salvage the meal, though it was far from perfect. The pasta was slightly overcooked, the vegetables were unevenly roasted, and the sauce had too much salt. But when they sat down at her dining table, plates in front of them, and the city lights glowing beyond the windows, none of that mattered. This is terrible, Evelyn said after taking a bite. It really is, Daniel agreed. They both laughed, and the tension that had hung between them in the kitchen dissolved. They talked through dinner about Lily's upcoming school play, about a difficult board meeting Evelyn had navigated, about the small moments that made up their lives. The conversation flowed easily, the way it always did between them, and Daniel found himself forgetting where he was, forgetting that this woman across from him was a CEO with more money than he could fathom. She was just Evelyn, and he was just Daniel. After dinner, they moved to the couch, wine glasses in hand. Evelyn tucked her legs beneath her, her body angled toward him, and Daniel realized how comfortable this had become. How natural. Can I ask you something? Evelyn said after a while. Always. Do you ever think about what comes next? With us, I mean? Daniel's pulse quickened. They'd been dancing around this question for weeks now, neither of them willing to name what was happening between them. All the time, he admitted. And I don't know. He set down his wine glass, his gaze steady on hers. I know what I want, but I also know that our lives are complicated. Different. Different doesn't mean impossible. Doesn't it? Daniel's voice was gentle but honest. You're a CEO, Evelyn. You have responsibilities, commitments, a world that demands everything from you, and I'm a single dad working construction, trying to give my daughter a stable life. How do those two things fit together? Evelyn's expression tightened, but she didn't look away. I don't know. But I know that when I'm with you, I feel more like myself than I have in years. And I don't want to lose that just because it's complicated. Daniel felt something crack open in his chest. I don't want to lose it either. Then what do we do? He reached out, taking her hand. We try. One moment at a time, just like we've been doing. Evelyn's eyes glistened, but she smiled. One moment at a time. She shifted closer, her head resting against his shoulder, and Daniel wrapped his arm around her. They sat like that for a long time, the city glowing beyond the windows, the world outside fading into insignificance. And in that quiet, perfect moment, Daniel allowed himself to hope. The next morning, Daniel woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows. For a moment, he was disoriented. This wasn't his bed, wasn't his apartment. Then he remembered. Evelyn's place. They'd fallen asleep on the couch, her head on his chest, his arm around her shoulders. He looked down to find her still asleep, her breathing slow and even. She looked peaceful in a way he'd never seen before, all the sharp edges softened by sleep. Carefully, so as not to wake her, Daniel shifted and reached for his phone. 6 missed calls from Mrs. Chen and a text. Lily's fine. Stay as long as you need. About time you had a real night out. Daniel smiled despite himself. Mrs. Chen was going to be insufferable when he got home. Evelyn stirred, her eyes fluttering open. For a moment she looked confused. Then her gaze landed on him and she smiled. "Morning," she murmured. "Morning?" She sat up, pushing her hair out of her face. "I can't believe we fell asleep." "I can. Your couch is ridiculously comfortable." "It should be. It costs more than most cars." Daniel laughed. "Of course it did." Evelyn stretched, then glanced at the clock on the wall. "Do you have to go?" "Eventually, but not yet." She studied him for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "Stay for breakfast. I can't cook, but I can order from the place downstairs. They make incredible pancakes." "You don't have to—" "I want to," she interrupted. "Please." Daniel nodded. "Okay." Breakfast arrived 20 minutes later. Fluffy pancakes, fresh fruit, coffee that tasted better than anything Daniel had ever made at home. They ate on the couch, the morning light filling the apartment, and talked about nothing in particular. It felt easy, domestic, like something they'd been doing for years rather than weeks. "I have to go into the office later," Evelyn said eventually. "Board meeting at 2. But I was thinking, maybe we could do this again, soon? I'd like that." "What about next Saturday? There's a holiday market downtown. I thought maybe we could take Lily, if you're free." Daniel's heart swelled. "We're free." Evelyn's smile was radiant. "Good." When Daniel finally left, the city was fully awake, the streets bustling with weekend activity. He walked to the subway, his hands in his pockets, his mind replaying the night before. The way Evelyn had looked at him, the way she'd felt in his arms. He was falling for her. He knew that now. And the realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. The holiday market was everything Lily had dreamed of and more. Twinkling lights hung between vendor stalls. The smell of roasted chestnuts and hot cider filled the air, and music drifted from a small stage where a group played cheerful folk songs. Snow had started falling that morning, dusting the city in white, and Lily was beside herself with excitement. "Can we get hot chocolate?" she asked, bouncing on her toes. "We can get whatever you want," Evelyn said, her eyes bright. Daniel watched them together, Lily chattering nonstop, Evelyn listening with genuine interest, and felt something settle in his chest. This wasn't just about him and Evelyn anymore. This was about Lily, too. About the three of them, together. They wandered through the market, stopping at stalls selling handmade ornaments and knitted scarves. Evelyn bought Lily a snow globe with a tiny ice skater inside, and Lily insisted on carrying it herself, cradling it like treasure. At one stall, Daniel noticed Evelyn lingering over a display of delicate silver necklaces. One in particular caught her eye, a simple pendant shaped like a crescent moon. "You should get it," Daniel said. Evelyn shook her head. "I don't need it." "That's not what I asked." She looked at him, then back at the necklace. Before she could respond, Daniel pulled out his wallet and bought it. "Daniel, you don't have to." "I want to," he said, echoing her words from before. He handed her the small velvet pouch, and Evelyn opened it slowly, her fingers trembling slightly as she pulled out the necklace. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Can I?" Daniel asked, gesturing to the clasp. Evelyn turned, lifting her hair, and Daniel fastened the necklace around her neck. His fingers brushed her skin, and he felt her shiver. When she turned back, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Thank you." "You're welcome." Lily, oblivious to the weight of the moment, tugged on Evelyn's sleeve. "Can we go ice skating?" Evelyn laughed, wiping at her eyes. "I've never been ice skating." "Never?" Lily's eyes widened. "We have to go. Daddy will teach you. He's really good." Daniel groaned. "I'm not that good, Lily." "You're better than me," Lily argued. 20 minutes later, they were at the rink, lacing up rented skates. Evelyn looked terrified. "I'm going to fall," she said. "Probably," Daniel agreed. "But I'll catch you." He helped her onto the ice, his hand steady on her waist as she wobbled precariously. Lily zipped past them, already confident despite her size, laughing as she went. "Okay," Evelyn said, gripping Daniel's arms like a lifeline. "This was a terrible idea." "You're doing great." "I'm not moving." "That's step 1. Slowly, carefully, Daniel guided her forward. She fell twice in this first 10 minutes, both times pulling him down with her, and they ended up tangled together on the ice, laughing so hard they couldn't breathe. "This is humiliating," Evelyn gasped. "This is fun," Daniel corrected. By the end of the hour, Evelyn could make it halfway around the rink without falling. She was flushed and breathless, her hair escaping from her ponytail, and Daniel thought she'd never looked more beautiful. "I did it!" she exclaimed, gripping the railing. "You did," Daniel said, skating up beside her. Lily joined them, crashing into Evelyn's legs and nearly sending them both down again. "That was so fun! Can we come back?" "Anytime you want," Evelyn promised. They left the rink as the sun began to set, the sky painted in shades of pink and gold. Lily was exhausted, leaning heavily against Daniel as they walked. Evelyn carried the snow globe, her fingers brushing the crescent moon pendant at her throat. "Thank you for today," she said quietly. "Thank you," Daniel replied. "For being here. For all of this." Evelyn stopped walking, turning to face him. Lily had fallen asleep against his shoulder, her breathing soft and even. "Daniel," Evelyn began, her voice trembling slightly, "I need to tell you something." His heart stuttered. "What is it?" "I'm falling for you," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I've been trying not to. I've been telling myself it's too complicated, that our worlds don't fit, that I should protect myself, but I can't anymore. I'm falling for you, and I don't know what to do about it." Daniel stared at her, the world narrowing to just her face, her voice, her words. "You don't have to do anything," he said finally, "because I'm falling for you too." Evelyn's breath hitched, and before either of them could second-guess it, she stepped forward and kissed him. It was soft and tentative at first, her lips barely brushing his, like she was afraid he might pull away. But Daniel didn't pull away. He leaned in, his free hand coming up to cup her face, and deepened the kiss. It was everything the moment on the balcony had promised and more. It was warmth and hope and the terrifying, exhilarating feeling of falling without knowing where you'd land. When they finally broke apart, Evelyn was crying. "Hey," Daniel said gently, wiping away her tears with his thumb. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," she whispered. "This is my first kiss." Daniel's chest tightened. "I know." "And it was perfect." He smiled, pressing his forehead to hers. "Yeah, it was." Lily stirred against his shoulder, mumbling something incoherent, and they both laughed softly. "We should get her home," Daniel said. "Yeah," Evelyn agreed, but she didn't move, her hand still resting against his chest, her eyes locked on his. "Evelyn?" "Yeah?" "This isn't going to be easy." "I know, but I want to try, if you do." She smiled, tears still glistening on her cheeks. "I want to try." And as they walked through the snowy streets together, Lily asleep in Daniel's arms and Evelyn's hand in his, Daniel let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, they could make this work. The trouble started so quietly that neither of them noticed it at first. It began with missed phone calls. Daniel would try to reach Evelyn during his lunch break, but she'd be in meetings that ran long. She'd call him back hours later, her voice exhausted, apologizing for the delay. He'd tell her it was fine, that he understood. And he did. But understanding didn't make the silence any easier. Then came the canceled plans. Evelyn was supposed to join them for Lily's school play, but an emergency board meeting in Singapore pulled her away at the last minute. She'd sent flowers to the apartment afterward, a massive bouquet that Lily loved but that made Daniel's chest ache with disappointment. She wanted to be there, he'd told Lily, tucking her into bed that night. "I know, Daddy," Lily had said, but her voice was small and sad. The pattern continued through January and into February. Evelyn would make plans, then have to break them. She'd promise to visit, then get pulled into crisis after crisis at work. And Daniel, who had spent years building a stable, predictable life for his daughter, felt the ground beginning to shift beneath his feet. He tried to be patient, tried to remind himself that Evelyn's world was different, that her responsibilities were immense. But patience was harder when Lily asked why Evelyn wasn't coming to dinner again, or when he found himself eating alone at the kitchen table, staring at his phone and wondering if she was thinking about him too. On a Wednesday night in mid-February, Daniel's phone rang at 10:30. He'd been asleep for an hour already, exhausted from a long day at the construction site. He fumbled for the phone, his heart racing. "Hello? Daniel?" Evelyn's voice was thick with tears. "I'm sorry. I know it's late. I needed to hear your voice." He sat up, suddenly alert. "What's wrong?" "Everything." She let out a shaky breath. The Singapore deal fell through. 3 months of work, gone. The board is furious. My mother called today and told me I'm destroying my father's legacy. And I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending I have it all together. Daniel's chest tightened. "Where are you?" "My office." "At 10:30 at night?" "I've been here since 6 this morning." Her voice cracked. "I don't know how to stop, Daniel. I don't know how to just walk away." "Then don't walk away," he said gently. "Just take a break. Come here. Let me make you tea. Let me—" "I can't." The words came out sharp, almost desperate. "I have a meeting at 7 tomorrow morning. I need to prepare. I need to—" "Evelyn," Daniel's voice was firm but kind. "You need to sleep." Silence stretched between them, heavy and painful. "I'm scared," she whispered finally. "I'm scared that if I stop, even for a second, everything will fall apart. And I'm scared that if I don't stop, I'll lose you." Daniel closed his eyes, his throat tight. "You're not going to lose me." "How do you know?" "Because I'm not going anywhere." But even as he said it, Daniel felt the lie underneath. Because the truth was, he didn't know how much longer they could sustain this. The distance between their worlds wasn't just about money or status. It was about time, about presence, about being there for the small moments that made up a life. And those moments were slipping through their fingers. The breaking point came 2 weeks later, on a Saturday morning that should have been ordinary. Daniel had planned a simple day: breakfast with Lily, a trip to the library, maybe a movie in the afternoon. Evelyn was supposed to join them for lunch, a rare window of free time she'd carved out of her schedule. But at 11 o'clock, just as Daniel and Lily were getting ready to leave for the library, his phone buzzed. "I'm so sorry. Emergency meeting. Can't make lunch. We'll call later. E." Daniel stared at the message, his jaw tight. This was the 3rd time in 2 weeks. The 3rd time she'd promised to be there and then disappeared. "Is Evelyn coming?" Lily asked, tugging on his sleeve. Daniel forced a smile. "Not today, kiddo. She has to work." Lily's face fell. "She's always working." "I know." "Doesn't she want to see us anymore?" The question hit Daniel like a punch to the gut. "Of course she does, Lily. She's just busy." "Too busy for us." Daniel didn't have an answer for that, because the truth was, he was starting to wonder the same thing. They went to the library anyway, but the day felt hollow. Lily was quieter than usual. Her excitement dimmed, and Daniel couldn't shake the growing frustration that had been building in his chest for weeks. That night, after Lily was asleep, he called Evelyn. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice tight. "Hi." "Hi," Daniel said. "How was your meeting?" "Long, exhausting, necessary." She sighed. "I'm sorry about lunch. I know I keep doing this. Evelyn, we need to talk." Silence. "Okay," she said finally, her voice small. Daniel took a breath, trying to organize the tangled mess of thoughts in his head. "I don't think this is working." "What do you mean?" "This, us, whatever we're trying to do." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration bleeding into his voice. "You're pulling away, Evelyn. Maybe you don't see it, but I do. And Lily does too." "I'm not pulling away," she protested. "I'm just busy." "I know, you're always busy." Daniel's voice was harder now, edged with hurt. "But being busy isn't the same as being present. And I need someone who can be present. Lily needs that." "That's not fair," Evelyn said, her own voice rising. "You knew what my life was like when we started this. You knew I had responsibilities." "I did, but I also thought you'd make room for us, and you're not." "I'm trying," her voice broke. "I'm trying so hard, Daniel, but I can't just abandon everything I've built. I can't walk away from my company, my employees, my legacy. That's not who I am. I'm not asking you to abandon anything," Daniel shot back. "I'm asking you to show up, to be here, to stop choosing work over us every single time." "And what about you?" Evelyn's voice turned sharp, defensive. You won't let me into your world either. You keep me at arm's length, like I'm some visitor you're tolerating. You won't let me help with Lily. You won't let me be part of your life in any real way. Daniel froze. That's not true, isn't it? Every time I offer to pick Lily up from school, you say no. Every time I suggest we spend more time together, you find a reason why it won't work. You say you want me present, but you won't let me in. The accusation hung between them, sharp and painful. I'm protecting her, Daniel said quietly. I'm protecting Lily from getting too attached to someone who might not stay. Someone who might not stay? Evelyn's voice was barely a whisper now. Is that really what you think of me? Daniel didn't answer. He couldn't, because the truth was more complicated than that. He didn't doubt Evelyn's intentions, but he did doubt whether their worlds could ever truly align. I think we need space, he said finally, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. Space, Evelyn repeated, her voice hollow. Just time to figure out what we're doing. Because right now, it feels like we're both trying so hard to make this work that we're tearing each other apart instead. Silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Okay, Evelyn said, and Daniel could hear the tears in her voice. If that's what you want. It's not what I want, Daniel said, his own voice breaking. But I don't know what else to do. Neither do I. The line went quiet, except for the sound of their breathing. Two people who'd found each other in the chaos, now drowning in it. Goodbye, Daniel, Evelyn whispered. Goodbye, Evelyn. The call ended, and Daniel sat in the darkness of his living room, his phone still pressed to his ear, feeling like he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. The next 2 weeks were brutal. Daniel threw himself into work, picking up extra shifts and staying late to avoid the empty apartment that now felt too quiet. Lily asked about Evelyn constantly, and every time Daniel had to deflect or change the subject, it felt like a knife twisting in his chest. Mrs. Chen tried to talk to him about it, her eyes full of concern and frustration. You're being an idiot, she said bluntly one evening when she came by to watch Lily. Thanks for the support, Daniel muttered. I'm serious. That woman loves you. Anyone with eyes can see it, and you love her. It's not that simple, I say. It's exactly that simple. You're just too scared to admit it. Daniel didn't argue, because she was right. He was scared. Scared of losing stability, scared of Lily getting hurt, scared of opening his heart fully and having it shattered again. But what he hadn't anticipated was how much it would hurt to push Evelyn away. Meanwhile, Evelyn was unraveling. She'd always been good at compartmentalizing, at separating her personal life from her professional one. But now, the walls were crumbling. She sat through meetings without hearing a word. She signed contracts without reading them. Jessica had to pull her aside twice to ask if she was okay. I'm fine, Evelyn said each time, the lie transparent. At night, she'd sit in her empty apartment, staring at the crescent moon necklace Daniel had given her, and wonder how something that had felt so right could fall apart so quickly. Her mother called on a Thursday, her voice clipped and businesslike. I heard the Singapore deal is back on track, Victoria Grant said without preamble. Well done. Thank you, Evelyn replied, her tone flat. You sound tired. I am tired. Then take a vacation. Go to the Hamptons for a weekend. You need to recharge. Evelyn almost laughed. A weekend in the Hamptons wasn't going to fix what was broken inside her. I'm fine, Mother. You don't sound fine. You sound distracted. Is something going on? Evelyn hesitated. She'd never talked to her mother about Daniel, never mentioned him at all. Victoria Grant didn't approve of distractions, especially romantic ones. But something in Evelyn cracked. I met someone, she said quietly. Silence. You met someone, Victoria repeated, her tone carefully neutral. Yes. And? And it didn't work out. I see. Her mother's voice softened, just slightly. Was it serious? Yes. Evelyn's throat tightened. It was serious. Then I'm sorry, darling, but perhaps it's for the best. You have so much on your plate right now. A relationship would only complicate things. Evelyn closed her eyes, her mother's words confirming everything she'd feared. That love was a complication. That connection was a distraction. That success and happiness couldn't coexist. Maybe you're right, Evelyn said, though the words felt like giving up. I usually am. Victoria's tone turned brisk again. Now, about the quarterly projections. Evelyn barely heard the rest of the conversation. When it ended, she set down her phone and stared at the city lights beyond her window. She'd built everything her father had wanted. She'd proven she could run an empire, could handle the pressure, could sacrifice everything for success. But what did it matter if she was completely alone? The realization hit her like a tidal wave. She'd spent her entire life chasing her father's approval, trying to live up to a legacy that wasn't even hers. And in the process, she'd lost the one thing that had made her feel real. She'd lost Daniel. The decision came to her in the middle of the night, sharp and sudden and terrifying. She couldn't keep living like this. Something had to change. The next morning, Evelyn walked into the office with a clarity she hadn't felt in weeks. Jessica looked up from her desk, her eyes widening at whatever she saw in Evelyn's expression. Are you okay? Jessica asked. I need you to clear my schedule for Friday, Evelyn said. All of Friday? Yes. You have 3 meetings, a conference call with Tokyo, and I'll reschedule them. Jessica blinked. All of them? All of them. Evelyn's voice was firm. And I need you to find out where Daniel Brooks is working this week. Jessica's expression shifted from confusion to understanding, a slow smile spreading across her face. Finally. Finally what? Finally, you're doing something about it. Evelyn didn't respond. She just turned and walked into her office, her heart pounding. She had no idea if this would work. No idea if Daniel would even listen to her, but she had to try. Because the alternative, a life without him, without Lily, without the small moments that made everything else worthwhile, was unbearable. Friday morning dawned cold and gray, the kind of weather that promised snow. Daniel was on a job site in Queens, working on framing for a new office building. The work was hard and physical, exactly what he needed to keep his mind from spiraling. He was up on the scaffolding, hammering in a support beam, when Marcus appeared below, waving to get his attention. Brooks, you've got a visitor. Daniel frowned, setting down his hammer. What? A visitor. At the site entrance. Daniel climbed down, his mind racing through possibilities. Mrs. Chen wouldn't come here. Lily was at school. Who? Then he saw her. Evelyn stood just outside the chain-link fence, her hands shoved in the pockets of her long coat, her hair whipping in the wind. She looked out of place among the construction equipment and concrete, but she also looked determined. Daniel's heart stuttered. He walked over slowly, his boots crunching on gravel, until he stood on the opposite side of the fence. Hi, Evelyn said, her voice barely audible over the noise of the site. Hi, Daniel replied. What are you doing here? I needed to see you. Evelyn, please, just let me talk. She took a shaky breath. I've been miserable without you. Completely, utterly miserable. And I know I screwed up. I know I kept choosing work over you, over us. But I was scared, Daniel. I was scared that if I let myself need you, I'd lose everything I'd built, that I'd become weak. Daniel's throat tightened, but he didn't interrupt. But I was wrong, Evelyn continued, her voice breaking. Because the truth is, I've never been weaker than I am right now. Without you, without Lily, I'm just empty. And I don't want to be empty anymore. What are you saying? Daniel asked quietly. I'm saying I want to fight for this. For us. I know it's going to be hard. I know our worlds are different. But I'm willing to make changes. Real changes. I want to be present. I want to show up. I want to be part of your life. If you'll let me. Daniel stared at her, his chest aching with a mixture of hope and fear. And what about your company? Your legacy? I'm stepping back, Evelyn said. Not stepping down, but stepping back. I'm hiring a COO to handle the day-to-day operations. I'll still be CEO, but I won't be drowning anymore. I'll have time. Time for the things that actually matter. Daniel's eyes widened. Evelyn, you don't have to do that for me. I'm not doing it for you, she said, her voice fierce. I'm doing it for me, because I finally realized that my father's legacy isn't mine to carry. I get to build my own life, and I want that life to include you. The words hung between them, raw and honest and terrifying. Daniel felt something crack inside him. The wall he'd built to protect himself, to protect Lily, crumbling under the weight of Evelyn's honesty. I was scared too, he admitted. Scared of letting you in. Scared of what would happen if Lily got attached and you left. Scared that I wasn't enough for someone like you. You are enough, Evelyn said, tears streaming down her face now. You've always been enough. Daniel didn't think. He just moved. He opened the gate, crossed the distance between them, and pulled her into his arms. She clung to him, her face buried against his chest, her body shaking with sobs. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry too, Daniel said, his voice rough. I shouldn't have pushed you away. I should have fought harder. We both should have. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other as the world continued around them. Workers shouted, machinery beeped, the wind howled, but none of it mattered. Finally, Evelyn pulled back just enough to look up at him, her eyes red but hopeful. So what do we do now? She asked. Daniel smiled, brushing a tear from her cheek. We try again, one moment at a time. One moment at a time, she repeated. And then he kissed her, soft and deep and full of promise. It wasn't their first kiss, but it felt like a beginning. They spent that night talking, not about the future, or grand plans, or how they'd make everything work. They talked about the small things, the moments they'd missed in the weeks apart, the thoughts they'd had in the middle of sleepless nights, the way absence had carved holes in their daily routines. Daniel told her about Lily asking for her every morning at breakfast. Evelyn admitted she'd kept the snow globe on her desk and looked at it whenever meetings became unbearable. When exhaustion finally caught up with them, Evelyn fell asleep on Daniel's couch for the second time, her head on his chest, his arm wrapped protectively around her. This time, when morning came, neither of them wanted to move. The sound of small feet padding down the hallway made them both freeze. Daddy? Lily's sleepy voice called out. Daniel gently shifted Evelyn, who stirred and blinked awake, disoriented. Lily's up, he whispered. Evelyn sat up quickly, smoothing her hair, suddenly aware that she was still wearing yesterday's clothes and probably looked like she'd been through a storm. Daddy, are you awake? Lily appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. Then she saw Evelyn and stopped, her expression transforming from sleepy to stunned to absolutely radiant. Evelyn. She launched herself across the room, and Evelyn barely had time to brace herself before Lily crashed into her, small arms wrapping around her neck with surprising strength. You came back, Lily said, her voice muffled against Evelyn's shoulder. I thought you were gone forever. Evelyn's throat constricted. She looked at Daniel over Lily's head, and he mouthed, She missed you. I missed you too, sweetheart, Evelyn managed, hugging Lily tight. So much. Lily pulled back, studying Evelyn's face with the serious expression she got when she was thinking hard about something. Are you staying this time? The question hung in the air, heavier than any 6-year-old should be able to make it. Evelyn glanced at Daniel again, and he gave her a small nod. I'm staying, Evelyn said, if that's okay with you. Lily's grin could have lit up the entire city. It's very okay. Can you make breakfast with us? Daddy burns the pancakes sometimes. Hey, Daniel protested. That only happened twice. 3 times, Lily corrected, holding up 3 fingers. Evelyn laughed, and it felt like breathing after being underwater for too long. I'd love to help with breakfast. The pancakes were still slightly burnt. Some things didn't change, but they were perfect anyway. Lily chattered nonstop about everything she'd been doing, showing Evelyn drawings she'd made and telling her about a loose tooth that was this close to falling out. Daniel watched them together, something tight in his chest finally loosening. After breakfast, while Lily was occupied with her coloring books, Evelyn and Daniel sat at the small kitchen table with fresh coffee. We need to talk about the real stuff, Daniel said quietly. About how this actually works. Evelyn nodded. I know. I can't be your secret, Evelyn. I won't put Lily through that. If we're doing this, we're really doing this. I don't want you to be a secret. She wrapped her hands around her mug, gathering courage. But you need to know what you're getting into. The press will find out eventually. They'll dig into your life, into mine, into everything. They'll make assumptions. They'll be cruel. I can handle cruel. Can you? Because they'll say I'm slumming it. They'll say you're after my money. They'll take pictures of Lily and put them in tabloids without asking permission. Her voice cracked slightly. I can't protect you from that. Daniel reached across the table and took her hand. Then we'll face it together. All of it. I'm not afraid of your world, Evelyn. I'm just afraid of losing you again. You won't, she promised. Not if I can help it. So what do we do? What does this look like? Evelyn took a deep breath. I scale back at work. Not completely. I can't walk away from the company. But I can delegate more, trust my team, stop trying to control everything. She met his eyes. And I make time, real time. Not stolen moments or canceled dinners, actual consistent time with you and Lily. What about me? Daniel asked. What do I change? You stop assuming you're not enough, Evelyn said firmly. You stop thinking that because I have money or power or whatever, that somehow makes you less important. Because you're not less, Daniel. You're everything. His eyes glistened. I'm working on it. We'll work on it together. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, hands clasped across the table, before Lily's voice rang out from the living room. Are you guys being mushy? Mrs. Chen says grown-ups are always mushy. Daniel laughed, wiping at his eyes. Yeah, kiddo, we're being a little mushy. Okay, but not too mushy. It's gross. Evelyn smiled, and for the first time in weeks, the future didn't feel overwhelming. It felt possible. The next few weeks were an exercise in intentionality. Evelyn restructured her schedule, blocked off time that was non-negotiable, and for the first time in her career started saying no. She missed a gala. She delegated a pitch meeting. She left the office at 6 o'clock 3 days in a row, and her assistant looked at her like she'd grown a second head. Are you feeling okay? Jessica asked on the third day. I'm feeling better than I have in years, Evelyn replied. She showed up for Lily's school play, a chaotic rendition of The Three Little Pigs, where Lily played a wolf with more enthusiasm than accuracy. Evelyn sat between Daniel and Mrs. Chen, who'd brought homemade cookies and a running commentary on every child's performance. When Lily took her bow, she waved directly at Evelyn, who waved back with tears in her eyes. She adores you, Mrs. Chen observed. The feeling's mutual, Evelyn said. Mrs. Chen patted her hand. Good. That one needs people who stick around. The weight of that statement settled over Evelyn. She looked at Daniel, who was applauding loudly, his face bright with pride. Then at Lily, who was still waving even though the curtain was closing. She wasn't just dating Daniel anymore. She was becoming part of something bigger, a family. And that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. After the play, they went for ice cream, Lily's request, and ended up at a small shop Daniel had been taking her to since she was a toddler. The owner, an older woman named Rosa, greeted them warmly. Daniel! And little Lily! And who's this? Rosa's eyes sparkled with curiosity as she looked at Evelyn. This is Evelyn, Daniel said, his hand finding Evelyn's. She's my girlfriend. It was the first time he'd said it out loud, and Evelyn felt her heart skip. Rosa beamed. Finally, I've been telling this one for years he needs someone, and you look like someone worth keeping around. Evelyn laughed. I'm trying to be. They got their ice cream and sat at a small table by the window. Lily insisted on trying everyone's flavors, declaring Evelyn's salted caramel the winner. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent to the small, perfect moment happening inside. I like this, Lily announced, chocolate ice cream smeared across her chin. Like what, sweetheart? Daniel asked, wiping her face with a napkin. This, us, being together. She looked between them. It feels right. Daniel and Evelyn exchanged glances, and Evelyn felt something settle in her chest. Out of the mouths of children, she thought. Yeah, Daniel said softly. It does. But not everything was simple. 2 weeks later, the first article appeared. Someone had spotted them at a restaurant, Daniel, Evelyn, and Lily, and taken photos. By the next morning, it was everywhere. Grant Industries CEO Evelyn Grant. Spotted with mystery man and child, read one headline. Billionaire heiress goes blue collar, inside Evelyn Grant's secret romance, read another. Daniel read them in his truck during his lunch break, his stomach churning. They'd been ready for this, had talked about it, but seeing it in print was different. The articles speculated about everything, his income, his background, whether he was using her for money. One particularly vicious piece suggested he was deliberately keeping Lily visible to manipulate Evelyn's emotions. He called her during his afternoon break. "Have you seen them?" he asked. "I've seen them." Her voice was tight. "I'm sorry, Daniel. I should have—" "Don't apologize. We knew this was coming." "That doesn't make it easier." She paused. "Are you okay?" Honestly, he wasn't sure. His coworkers had been giving him looks all morning, and Tommy had pulled him aside to ask if everything was sorted with his personal life. But he also knew that backing down now would mean losing everything that mattered. "I'm okay," he said. "Are you?" The board called an emergency meeting. They want to discuss image management. She laughed bitterly. "Like my personal life is something that needs to be managed." "What are you going to tell them?" "The truth. That I'm dating someone I care about, and it's none of their damn business." Despite everything, Daniel smiled. "That's my girl." "Yours," she repeated softly. "I like the sound of that." The board meeting was brutal. Evelyn sat at the head of the table, facing 12 men and women who'd helped build Grant Industries into what it was today. They were concerned about optics, about messaging, about how this relationship might affect stock prices and investor confidence. "We're not suggesting you end the relationship," Martin Kowalski, the oldest board member, said carefully. "We're simply asking you to consider the timing. Perhaps wait until the merger is finalized before making things public." "It's already public," Evelyn said. "The photos are everywhere." "Then perhaps issue a statement, something that clarifies this is a private matter and has no bearing on company operations." "Why would I need to clarify that?" Evelyn's voice was dangerously calm. "Do any of you issue statements when you start dating someone?" "That's different," Margaret Chen, no relation to Mrs. Chen, interjected. "You're the face of this company." "Exactly. I'm the face, not the property. I've given this company everything for the past 5 years. I've sacrificed relationships, health, sleep, any semblance of a personal life. And now that I've finally found something real, you want me to hide it because it might affect your portfolios?" The room fell silent. Evelyn stood, her hands flat on the table. "I'm not ending this relationship. I'm not hiding it. I'm not issuing apologetic statements or waiting for better timing. I'm living my life. And if that's a problem for any of you, you know where the door is." She walked out before anyone could respond, her heart pounding, her hands shaking. Jessica was waiting outside, her expression worried. "How bad was it?" Jessica asked. "Pretty bad." Evelyn leaned against the wall, closing her eyes. "I might have just alienated the entire board. Or you might have just reminded them who's actually in charge." Evelyn opened her eyes. "You think?" "I know." Jessica handed her a bottle of water. "You've been letting them dictate your life for too long. It's about time you took it back." That evening, Evelyn showed up at Daniel's apartment unannounced. He opened the door to find her looking exhausted but determined. "I told the board to back off," she said without preamble. Daniel pulled her inside. "What did they say?" "Nothing yet, but I'm sure I'll hear about it tomorrow." She collapsed onto his couch. "I don't care anymore, Daniel. I'm done letting other people control my life." He sat beside her, pulling her against him. "You're sure about this? About us?" "I've never been more sure of anything." Lily wandered in, already in her pajamas, and climbed onto the couch between them. "Are you staying for movie night?" she asked Evelyn hopefully. Evelyn looked at Daniel, who nodded. "Yeah, sweetheart, I'm staying." They watched an animated movie about talking animals, Lily eventually falling asleep, sprawled across both of them. When the credits rolled, Daniel carefully carried her to bed while Evelyn waited. When he returned, she was standing by the window, looking out at the city. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That I've spent my whole life in buildings like the one I work in," she said quietly. Looking down at the city, at all the lives happening below, and feeling completely separate from it all. Like I was watching life instead of living it. Daniel came up behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist. "And now? Now I'm living it." She turned in his arms, her hands coming up to frame his face. "With you. With Lily. And it's messy and complicated, and nothing like I planned, but it's real. And I don't want to lose that." "You won't." "How do you know?" "Because I won't let you." He kissed her forehead. "We're in this together, remember? Whatever comes." The fallout from the board meeting came swiftly. 3 members threatened to resign. 2 major investors called concerned meetings. The press doubled down on their coverage, dissecting every aspect of Daniel's life: his late wife, his job, his finances. Someone found out where Lily went to school, and Daniel had to meet with the principal to ensure no reporters could access the grounds. It was overwhelming, exhausting. At times, it felt impossible. But they didn't break. Evelyn hired a publicist who specialized in crisis management, not to hide the relationship, but to protect Lily's privacy. Daniel sat down with Lily and explained in simple terms that some people might say mean things about them, but it didn't change who they were. "Are you and Evelyn going to stop being together?" Lily asked, her eyes wide with worry. "No, baby, we're not." "Promise?" "Promise." Mrs. Chen, predictably, became their fiercest defender. When a reporter approached her in the grocery store asking for information about Daniel, she'd given them an earful about privacy and decency that made the reporter retreat so fast they left their notebook behind. "I kept it," she told Daniel proudly, showing him the notebook. Evidence of their shame. Marcus called to check in, offering support and surprisingly astute advice about dealing with media attention. "Just remember," he said, "they'll move on eventually. There's always a new scandal, a new story. You just have to outlast them." Slowly, painfully, the storm began to calm. The articles became less frequent. The board, seeing that Evelyn wasn't budging and that company operations hadn't suffered, grudgingly accepted the situation. Some board members did resign, but they were replaced by people who cared more about Evelyn's leadership than her personal life. 3 months after the first photos appeared, Evelyn made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She called a company-wide meeting and announced she was promoting her COO, Thomas Chen, again, no relation to Mrs. Chen, to a newly created position of co-CEO. She would remain in charge of strategic vision and major decisions, but day-to-day operations would be shared. "I've spent 5 years running this company like my life depended on it," she told the assembled employees. "And in the process, I forgot to actually have a life. That changes now. Grant Industries will continue to thrive, but it will do so with a leadership team that understands the value of balance, delegation, and trust." The announcement made headlines, but this time they were different. "Grant CEO revolutionizes leadership structure," read one. "Evelyn Grant proves you can have it all, just not all at once," read another. Jessica cornered her after the announcement. "You're really doing this." "I really am." "And you're happy?" Evelyn thought about Daniel, about Lily, about Tuesday morning coffee and Saturday walks and burnt pancakes, about ice skating and terrible homemade dinners, and feeling, for the first time in her life, like she belonged somewhere. "Yeah," she said, "I really am." 6 months after that first dinner at Evelyn's apartment, on a warm spring evening, Daniel invited her to a place he'd never taken her before. "Where are we going?" she asked as they drove out of the city, Lily buckled in the back seat and singing along to the radio. "You'll see." They ended up at a small cemetery on the edge of the city. Evelyn's confusion must have shown on her face, because Daniel reached over and squeezed her hand. "There's someone I want you to meet," he said quietly. They walked through the rows of headstones until they reached one marked Sarah Brooks, beloved wife and mother. Daniel knelt down, brushing leaves off the stone. Lily joined him, placing a small bouquet of daisies she'd picked that morning against the headstone. "Hi, Mommy," Lily said softly. "We brought Evelyn to meet you." Evelyn's throat tightened. She knelt beside them, her hand finding Daniel's. "Sarah," Daniel said, his voice steady but emotional, "this is Evelyn. She's become really important to us. To me and Lily both. And I wanted her to know you, even if it's like this." He turned to Evelyn. "Sarah was the strongest person I've ever known. When she got sick, she fought like hell, not for herself, but for Lily, for us. And before she died, she made me promise something." "What?" Evelyn whispered. "That I wouldn't stop living. That I'd find happiness again, even if it felt impossible. That I'd give Lily a full life with people who loved her." His eyes were wet, but he smiled. "I think she'd like you." Evelyn couldn't speak. She looked at the headstone, at this woman she'd never met but who'd shaped everything about the man she loved. "Thank you," she finally managed, for giving the world Daniel and Lily. I'll take care of them, I promise. Lily leaned against Evelyn, and they sat there together, three people connected by love and loss and hope as the sun began to set. On the drive home, Lily fell asleep in the back seat, and Evelyn and Daniel drove in comfortable silence. "Thank you for taking me there," Evelyn said. "Thank you for coming. I meant what I said about taking care of you both." Daniel glanced at her. "I know you did." "I love you," Evelyn said, the words tumbling out before she could second-guess them. "I should have said it before, but I was scared. I'm not scared anymore. I love you, Daniel, and I love Lily, and I want this, all of this, forever." Daniel pulled the car over to the side of the road, putting it in park. He turned to face her, his expression intense. "Say it again," he said. "I love you." "I love you too," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I have for a while now. I was just waiting for the right moment to tell you." "And this is it?" "Pulled over on the side of the road?" "This is it." He cupped her face in his hands. "Because I can't wait another second." He kissed her, and it was different from all the other kisses they'd shared. It wasn't tentative or exploratory or even passionate. It was certain. It was a promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Evelyn rested her forehead against his. "So what now?" she asked. Daniel smiled. "Now we live. One moment at a time, just like we said." 3 months later, on a Saturday morning, Daniel woke to find Lily jumping on his bed. "Daddy! Daddy, wake up!" He groaned, grabbing her and pulling her down into a hug. "It's Saturday. We're supposed to sleep in. But Evelyn's here, and she brought bagels, and she says we're doing something special today." Daniel's eyes opened fully. "She's here? In the kitchen?" He got up, pulling on a shirt, and found Evelyn indeed in his kitchen, setting out bagels and cream cheese and fruit. She looked up when he entered, her smile bright. "Morning, sleepyhead. What are you doing here so early?" "I wanted to talk to both of you about something." She looked nervous, which was unusual for her. "Can we sit?" They gathered around the small kitchen table, Lily bouncing with barely contained excitement. Evelyn took a deep breath. "So I've been thinking about the future, about what I want my life to look like." She looked at Daniel. "About what our life could look like." Daniel's heart started pounding. "My apartment is too big and too empty," Evelyn continued, "and this place is wonderful, but it's small for 3 people, so I had an idea." She pulled out her phone, showing them photos of a brownstone in a quiet neighborhood. "It has 4 bedrooms, a yard, and it's walking distance to Lily's school. It needs some work, but I thought, maybe we could make it ours. All of us. Together." Daniel stared at the photos, then at her. "You want us to move in together?" "I want us to build a home together," Evelyn corrected. "If you'll have me." Lily looked at Daniel with pleading eyes. "Can we, Daddy? Please?" Daniel's eyes were burning. He looked at Evelyn, this woman who'd walked into his life in a borrowed suit and a bad mood and somehow become his entire future. "Yes," he said, his voice breaking. "Yes, we'll have you." Evelyn's face crumpled with relief and joy. Lily shrieked and launched herself at Evelyn, and Daniel joined them, wrapping his arms around both of them. They stayed like that for a long time, tangled together in Daniel's tiny kitchen, while the bagels got cold and the morning sun streamed through the windows. The brownstone became theirs 3 months later. They spent weekends painting rooms and picking out furniture and arguing good-naturedly about where things should go. Lily got the bedroom with the window seat she'd fallen in love with immediately. Daniel set up a small workshop in the basement for the woodworking he'd always wanted to try. Evelyn claimed a sunny corner room as her home office, though she used it far less than she'd planned. Mrs. Chen came for dinner once a week, always bringing food and unsolicited advice that they'd learned to appreciate. Marcus and his wife became regular visitors, their kids playing with Lily in the yard, while the adults drank wine on the porch. Evelyn scaled back further at work, eventually transitioning to a chairman role that let her focus on strategy while giving her time for the life she'd built. The company didn't suffer. If anything, it thrived under the new structure. Daniel got a promotion at work, eventually becoming a crew supervisor. He still worked with his hands, still came home tired and dirty, But now he came home to a house full of life. And Lily grew. She lost that tooth she'd been worried about, started taking piano lessons from a teacher Evelyn found, and began calling Evelyn Evie without anyone telling her to. On quiet nights, she'd ask about her mother, and they'd all sit together, Daniel, Evelyn, and Lily, and tell stories. Evelyn never tried to replace Sarah. She just made room for herself beside her memory. 2 years after they moved into the brownstone, on a crisp fall evening, Daniel took Evelyn back to the park where they'd gone ice skating with Lily. "Why are we here?" Evelyn asked, her hand warm in his. "Because this is where I knew," Daniel said. "Knew what?" "That I was going to spend the rest of my life with you." He dropped to one knee and Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth. "I don't have much to offer," Daniel said, pulling out a simple ring, a single diamond on a silver band. "Not compared to what you're used to. But I can promise you burnt pancakes and terrible dance moves and a life that's messy and real and full of love. Evelyn Grant, will you marry me?" Evelyn was crying, nodding before he even finished. "Yes, yes. 1,000 times yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, and she pulled him up, kissing him like her life depended on it. When they finally broke apart, breathless and laughing, Lily emerged from behind a nearby tree where she'd been hiding with Mrs. Chen, both of them cheering. "You knew?" Evelyn asked Daniel. "Of course I knew. I'm 6 3/4 now. I know everything." They all laughed, and as Daniel wrapped his arms around Evelyn and Lily crashed into their legs, he thought about how far they'd come. From a ballroom where neither of them belonged to a park where they'd built something beautiful. From two people afraid to hope to a family that had chosen each other. The wedding was small, held in the backyard of their brownstone on a perfect June afternoon. Lily was the flower girl, taking her job so seriously that she counted out each petal she dropped. Mrs. Chen cried through the entire ceremony. Marcus gave a toast that was equal parts touching and embarrassing. When the minister asked if they would take each other, through all the complications and challenges and beautiful moments ahead, they both answered without hesitation. "I do." And when Daniel kissed his wife for the first time, with Lily cheering and their friends applauding and the future stretching out before them bright with possibility, he knew that every single moment, the painful ones, the uncertain ones, the absolutely perfect ones, had led them exactly where they were meant to be, together. Years later, when people asked Evelyn about her greatest achievement, she never talked about the company she'd built, or the deals she'd closed, or the empire she'd inherited. She talked about a ballroom where she'd admitted she'd never been kissed, about a man in a borrowed suit who'd looked at her like she was more than a CEO, about a little girl who'd given her a pine cone and called her family. She talked about choosing love over fear, about building a life instead of an empire, about finding home in the most unexpected place. And she always ended the story the same way. "I spent 34 years thinking I had to choose between success and happiness. But the truth is, I just had to choose differently. I had to choose what was real." Daniel would usually add, "and burnt pancakes." Evelyn would laugh. "And burnt pancakes." Because in the end, that's what it came down to. Not the grand gestures or the perfect moments, but the small, imperfect, achingly real ones. The ones that built a life worth living. Together, they'd found what they'd both been missing. Not in spite of their differences, but because of them. Not by fitting into each other's worlds, but by building a new one entirely. And in that world, their world, a single dad and a CEO didn't just fall in love. They chose each other every single day, and that made all the difference.